I heavily believe that our industry is going to change over the next 12 to 24 months. Not 100% sure on how or what, but I believe it will behoove us to really start locking things down and ensuring that we enforce all these kind of rules and best practices on all of our clients. Thereby, if regulation, accreditation, certification comes down the pipe, we are, that much further a step ahead than our competitors. I'm Stephen Taylor. This is Weekly ST. For the last 10 years, we've been building a couple $1 million cybersecurity IT support company here in Chicagoland. I'm also fascinated with living a wholly successful life. We talk about this every single week and more. Please like, share, and subscribe. The world and the landscape is changing, clearly, right? Cybersecurity is more damaging and more costly to so many more organizations than ever before. And, currently a lot of, insurance companies are footing the bill, right? Paying the ransoms, some to the tune of, tens of thousands of dollars, but I've seen $500,000. I've seen millions of dollars, right? And typically this coverage is not that expensive, for small businesses like us, with 10, 20 employees, maybe a couple $1,000s a year, maybe $5,000 a year. How can they absorb, hundreds of thousands of dollars in losses? So I am a believer that, whether the federal government steps in and says, hey, we've got to have some kind of regulation in this industry, or, accreditation or certification, or maybe it's the insurance carriers stepping in and saying, hey, premiums are going to go through the roof unless you can show us that you've vetted and you've done all of these best practices with regard to cybersecurity and or had even maybe a third-party audit or whatever it might be. 10 years ago, I was in the insurance world, and so I saw the applications of, hey, these are the things that you need to vet for this organization. And, oftentimes that would be somewhat on the business's side of, the way they're securing paperwork and documents and things like that, but then also on the IT side. And that's gone from, the checkbox was, do you have backups, to now with some carriers, that is literally 15 different questions. Are they incremental? Are they snapshotting? Is it hourly? Is it off-siting? Is it verified, right? All of these different things with just regard to backups. And so the applications have gotten a heck of a lot longer, as they should, right? And so, I think that the insurance world is going to change in this too. And they're going to start to look for better providers, better IT shops who are doing things correctly and to a better standard, thereby keeping the businesses safe, thereby keeping the carriers in the black, so to speak. I heavily believe that our industry is going to change over the next 12 to 24 months. Not 100% sure on how or what, but I believe it will behoove us to really start locking things down and ensuring that we enforce all these kind of rules and best practices on all of our clients. Thereby, if regulation, accreditation, certification comes down the pipe, we are, that much further a step ahead than our competitors. And I think it's going to, change the industry in that there's going to be those that can and are capable. And then there's going to be those that really just don't have the budgets for it, don't have the manpower, don't have the knowledge. And you're kind of going to see kind of that, more of those guys in the repair shop model versus really true MSPs who can handle cybersecurity. And then, of course, even a whole nother tier of really the MSSP, managed security services providers, who really even do more than the rest of us. This year, the Department of Defense spent a big part of the year re-upping kind of their cybersecurity mandates and their requirements. And over the next 5 years, they're rolling out really 5 levels of kind of this CMMC framework, where they are now requiring anybody who deals with classified information in the DoD supply chain, all those kinds of things, to be up to one of these 5 levels. And it has to be third-party verified, right? And they'll have to re-up that every 3 years. So, a lot of change in those vendors and businesses that deal in that domain, and a huge opportunity, right, for those of us in IT, in cybersecurity to, be up to those standards and be able to provide those standards for those types of customers. But I believe we could see something like that, a simplified version, pushed by the Fed saying, hey, we've got to get this industry up to spec, up to standards, up to, accreditation, or we're going to be regulated in some fashion, right? To really start to limit and mitigate all of these mishaps that are happening. And this stuff isn't cheap either, right? If you look at, if we were required to be SOC 2 compliant or whatever it might be, that's tens of thousands of dollars for that level of certification and compliance, and getting all of our teams up to standard and those certifications, whatever they might be. So this is not a cheap venture, but pros and cons on both sides. I think it is somewhat necessary because there's a lot of IT shops that we all know that are out there, saying that they can do it the same as the rest of us and really not holding to these best practices, not knowledgeable, not able to be proactive on a lot of this stuff, and certainly not able to handle incident response, right? Which if and when something goes wrong, right, we need teams and standards to, be able to remediate and, follow up on whatever might be happening in a business or an organization. They're just not going to be capable, right? A 3-man shop who's running around putting out fires is not going to have the free time or the resources to implement a ton of best practices, a ton of cybersecurity features, right? Learn all these new tools, right? And so that's where I go again into there's going to be a consolidation of this industry, right? It would be a fool's errand. As a 3-man shop, I could not fathom us trying to navigate all of what we do. We struggled to do it with 15 engineers, right? And we've got to continue this growth path to be able to support and do more. The cyber wave and the COVID wave, right, increased our workload by 30%. And we didn't get any more, we didn't all of a sudden magically have 30% more team to handle 30% more workload. So I think in a good way, right, there's going to be consolidation in this industry. There's already a lack of talent. We need more people than we ever have before. So again, I think this is another one of those things that's going to push us to consolidation, which I think can be done in a good way, right? It doesn't have to look like classic capitalism, mergers and acquisitions, slashing team members. It can look as, two good things coming together for the betterment of everybody involved. First and foremost, every MSP needs to lock down their house. 2-factor on all the tools, up to date everything, controlling everything, least privileged accounts in every place, right? Internally, right? The cobbler has to take care of his own shoes. And then it's deploying these same kinds of tactics and best practices to the clients, right? And we've taken a hard stance. We've said, this is the way that we're going to do things. It's not an optional. It's not an upsell. It's not, if you'd like it. We've put the hard line in the sand to say, this is what we're doing. And I think that's what it's going to require, right? Because the insurance carriers are going to stop looking past this, right? And if accreditation or regulation or certification comes down, it's not going to pass anymore. It's not going to fly. And so you're better off getting up to, an A level on everything that you're doing, ready and there for when, regulation or accreditation comes down for us. I think it's a question of, do you feel like you've got your house locked down, or as most of us might say, right, are we still looking for, what are the other 1 or 2 things that I need to know about to, really make sure that I've got my own house locked down?